Don't be naked for the party. Get dressed for the property. Get dressed for the party. Stage your house.
That's a great analogy. I love that. I'm going to use that.
Do it.
Hey, seller, you're going to a party.
Yeah.
I like it. Seriously, that's good.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. My name is Matt, that is Shawn, and welcome to our show. Shawn, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about 7 red flags to watch for when buying a home in as-is condition. The old as-is. As-is is basically like a red flag in itself. So, 7 red flags to look out for. We're going to be talking about 5 ways to build wealth through real estate. It's not just buying and holding. And then we're also going to go through the complete selling timeline of how long it actually takes to sell a property. I don't think we've done this in a really long time. And the steps that you need to take. So let's start with the 7 red flags that you need to watch out for if you're buying a house in as-is condition. This comes to us from Realtor.com. Flag number 1, inspect the foundation, Shawn. House, there's a lot can go wrong, and I think maybe the biggest thing is a cracked foundation. Yeah,
I mean, and get an inspector every time. I mean, just because it's as-is doesn't mean that you can't have an inspection, and sometimes maybe they say that, but always have an inspector run through there. And the foundation is key, number 1. They will look to see if there's any water intrusion and cracks. And the cracks, I mean, every foundation is going to have cracks, so don't let a little crack scare you. But it's the significant cracks. If you can stick your finger in that crack, or if it's shifting a little bit, then that's something to worry about, and that's what should pique your interest.
Yeah, my first thought when reading this is inspect the foundation. I was like, okay, cool. How do I do this? Like, what crack is a good crack? What crack is a bad crack? And I was thinking, like, I'm not a foundation expert, but then I thought to a house I saw with a client, and we went into the basement, and there were literally like 2x4s holding the house up, and the house was at a great price, and my client was interested, and I'm like, there's no way you want to reach out to a foundation company and go through like a $75,000 like repair for this. Like, there's no way you would want to do that. So obviously anything crazy like that is definitely not advisable.
Yeah, and you're going to go into the basement and you can see cracks and look at the floors. And a lot of times some people will paint over a lot of stuff. They'll put some mortar down over it and then paint over it to make it look nice. But you can also see them from the exterior as well. So if you walk around the exterior side of the house, you should be able to see some cracks. And like I said, again, there's small cracks. They're going to happen. It's the bigger ones or the shifting ones that you want to be wary of.
Red flag number 2 is check for additions. Make sure the addition was done correctly. Again, things like, well, how do I make sure that the addition was done correctly? And it reminds me of a house I saw in the Herndon area. And the drywall, there was like an addition, but it felt like it was outside. Like there was exterior brick, but then it was like drywalled on the other 3 walls. It was the strangest thing, and the electrical outlets were like sticking out, and it was like someone's uncle had done the addition. And I like the rest of the house aside, the rest of the house was fine, but I was like, listen, you can't buy this house. This wasn't permitted, and this doesn't add value. In fact, it takes away from the value.
Yeah, and honestly, there are a lot of people that try to do additions themselves, or the number 1 thing is finishing their basement. They think, oh, I can finish the basement myself. Who's going to know? I'm just going to throw up some drywall, run some electrical lines, and we'll be good. Well, and then, you go to sell the property and you're not disclosing that, first of all, that you didn't have a contractor do it. But then things like additions or small, renovations like that, you have to get permitted. And we can go into the county site and see if there's permits pulled. We can see if they were closed out as well. So yeah, they were pulled at the beginning, but they weren't closed out. So what does that do? Well, if our inspector finds out and says, hey, I don't think this was done professionally, you might want to check the permits. Then in that home inspection period, or in this case, you're selling it as is and you're not going to warrant anything, then you have to try to get those permits post afterwards, right? Which could be really difficult. And I've seen this in 2 different ways where, the seller was made to go get the permits, which is pretty easy for them. But then there's other nightmares where it's like, all right, they didn't do anything to get the permit, so you'd have to cut open walls to make sure the electrical is good. It could be really costly in the end.
Yeah, I had a situation earlier where it was a VA loan and there were open permits. That is a recipe for a stressful closing. Thankfully, my client was a permit ninja and we were able to close those out. Number 4 is consider the flood zone. This one's tough because you're thinking, okay, flood zone, I'll see it in the MLS. I won't go see the house, or the river's like really far away. But how about those houses that don't disclose they're in a flood zone, whether maliciously or the realtor just forgets, or the realtor just doesn't know, or the seller is just hiding that information? Being in a flood zone is risky because not only the water, but flood insurance is also very expensive.
Yeah, and the lenders are going to look at that, and they'll look at the flood maps, and those flood maps change. And we don't see it all that much, but I've seen a few listings recently that were in the floodplains. And your insurance will go up significantly and sometimes lenders won't even lend depending on, where you are.
Another one is easements, like county easements. There's this part of Falls Church where I think it's like a sewer line that runs through the backyard. And that alone is like, okay, I probably don't want that, but maybe it's not that big of a deal. But it's also in a neighborhood where there's a lot of like new construction houses. And if this like 1,000-foot Cape Cod, which works for my clients now, but could potentially be a tear down in the future, it has this like easement on it that may cause a builder like not to want to pay like top dollar for that in the future. So every house you go to, it shouldn't be like, all right, Mr. Real Estate Agent, tell me all the easements and like let's go to the county courtroom to like find out all the flood zones and whatnot. But you got to do your due diligence.
Yeah, sure. and that's the one funny thing about our jurisdiction, Virginia. There's no contingency for a survey. Right? So you can go to closing and then all of a sudden you're going to get your survey. And this is what happens in Virginia. We don't get it right away. We'll get it at closing and they'll be like, here's your survey. We didn't see anything wrong.
Why don't we get it right away?
I don't know. That should be, in my opinion, one contingency. Like in Texas, I believe there is a contingency. Like you have to give that survey. But this is going to show your easements. So you could have an easement on your property. You go to settlement and you're like, what's that thing? The lawyers in this transaction should let you know if they find anything, any encroachments to the properties. Easements are big though, and a lot of times you're going to have utility easements. But I just closed on one this week, and she let me know that the new buyer let me know that the owner next to her actually has an easement to let other people cross their property to get to the bike trail. So it's an easement that the other property has, not hers, but I found it interesting that was there.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Let me know what house that is and I'll cut across their lawn to go biking.
It's out in Leesburg if you're going biking.
I've been biking in Leesburg.
Yeah.
Amazing place to go biking.
It is.
All right. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is check for mold. Pretty standard.
Self-explanatory, yeah.
Number 6, inspect the wastewater system. This has to do with running a snake, running a camera into the sewer pipes. This one's tricky because do you see a lot of people doing this before they buy a property?
I don't.
But it can also be tens of thousands of dollars if there's a crack in the sewer line. So how do you get around something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think. All right, I'll bring up a couple stories, but one, this is a lot to do with septic. So septic systems, you definitely want to get inspected. So that's a different thing from a public sewer inspection. I've never actually scoped a sewer in any of my inspections or sales. But the funny thing is my brother bought a house in Pittsburgh, and the first group, and this was just this past, 2 years, in the past 2 years, and it was very competitive. And the first group that wrote on it backed out because they did a sewer inspection. They said, oh, there's a cracked pipe in there further. And so my brother's like, well, I'm not really scared about that. Let's go under contract and let me do the contingency. Let me hire my own company to do the scope. And they actually did it. And he hired a company. He's like, honestly, there's nothing wrong with this. Yeah. So, there are companies out there that maybe don't know what they're doing. Maybe I don't know what the deal was, but he ended up buying the house and he's had no problem. So, but then there's other things like there's like a terracotta pipe, I think, that they used back in the day that crushes easily. At my old house, I had to replace one of those. It cost probably about $2,000 to replace it. And it was just a small piece, but still, these properties that are built in the 40s, 50s, some of those materials that they used for those piping, they're not going to be good anymore. So it could be costly to you.
Number 6 was the one that we just covered. Number 7 is not allowing a home inspection. Definitely a red flag if the seller doesn't allow an inspection. Clearly, you would think they're trying to hide something. So, Shawn, have you come across this where they say no inspections allowed? I'm sure you have.
I've seen it. I've never written on one that didn't have it. And personally, I would be like, what? Okay, then I'm not buying it.
Because you'll see houses where it says like tenant occupied, no access, or like properties dangerous, like no access. You just write your offer. But usually those are, could be like a tear down or something where you're not going to be living there anyways.
I've seen plenty of tear downs that are like that, no inspections allowed. So
now certainly we advise our clients to do home inspections. If there's a competitive offer situation, it may make sense to do a pre-inspection or to waive the inspection. Would you ever buy a property without a home inspection?
Yeah, I would. Depends on what I'm doing. I think, I can see a lot of things, but I might just have my inspector come through. I mean,
would you ever buy a property sight unseen without a home inspection?
No, I wouldn't. Unless I'm tearing it down, unless I'm buying it for the lot. I just wouldn't. This brings up another thing. When I do a listing appointment and somebody says, "Oh, I want to sell it as is," I'm like, "No, you don't. You don't want to sell it as is."
Why? Why is that?
Because it gives a negative connotation to the whole deal, right? So people are going to think that something's wrong with it. You don't want to check the box, sell it as is. In the state of Virginia, you're basically selling it as is anyways. I mean, you're not required to do any of the fixes. You have to disclose certain things to it, but state of Virginia is very laxed on that law. Why then would you market it as an as-is property? Because then people are going to think something's wrong with it. Unless it's something like a property we sold last year that was a complete gut job, right? We're not going to, you can do a home inspection, but we're not going to fix anything. You're going to gut this anyways. That's another thing. If your property is just needs new carpet and leaks here and there, small minor things, but you're afraid of that home inspection, that's not a reason to sell it as is. That's a way to scare away people.
What property was that?
Down in Old Town. Remember Princess Street?
Oh, yeah. Sure. Great. I love Princess Street.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next article. This comes to us from GoBankingRates.com. 5 ways to build wealth through real estate, according to experts. Number 1, live in and rent out a multi-family home if you're looking to buy a home of your own, but also don't aspire to invest in an income property. Kill both birds with one stone and live in part of the property. You could, if it's like a duplex, you could rent out part of the duplex. Now, Shawn, have you been following the missing middle saga in Arlington?
Of course I have.
It is coming to a headwind. I think there was a feisty county board meeting recently. A lot of placards, a lot of colorful signs, and a lot of NIMBYism and YIMBYism. No in my backyard and yes in my backyard. So, this is basically house hacking. It's more so like live in one of the housing units and then rent out another part. We don't have too many duplexes in this area where you'd buy like one half of the building and then live in the other half, but certainly in a lot of parts of the country this is definitely a possibility.
Absolutely, and it's a great way to build wealth. I'll bring up Pittsburgh again because that's where I grew up, and when we first moved out, or my buddies first moved out of their houses, they moved in together and they rented one side of the duplex, and the owner, who was not much older than them, in his 20s, bought this duplex. He rented out half and he stayed in half. And, in Pittsburgh, you could have bought this thing for probably $70,000. It's a car, right? Buy a duplex and rent out the other half. You're basically living payment free, and you're building wealth. And that property over the last 10, 15, 20 years has just skyrocketed in value. So I think that, a lot of people in our area will be scared away from doing this because it's so expensive to do. But if you can find them in other areas, they're very affordable. And even just not even living in the other half, just finding a duplex that rents, cash flow positive.
I could see you buying up duplexes in Pittsburgh. Yeah. I could see you buying up the block in the Burg. What's the worst neighborhood in Pittsburgh? Don't tell me, but think of that neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
I could see Shawn buying 5 or 10 cars that are equal to a house in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. No, my brother always talks about buying a different place. I'm like, you don't want to buy there. Just don't do it. Stop dreaming. But there are good options, and if you could find a good solid renter That's not going to destroy the property.
How about a nice Duquesne University renter, or
of course,
University of Pittsburgh? Is it University of Pitt or Pitt University?
Pitt University, yeah. Pitt, yeah. I mean, if you can find them close to those colleges, yeah, of course. But there's so many opportunities outside of there. My dad actually inherited properties from my grandfather. My grandfather used to buy up a bunch
Are they
of
still in the Battle name?
No, we sold them.
Okay.
My dad sold them a while ago because they were tough. When I was growing up, my dad owned a construction company. And so I learned a lot of construction by doing. And he owned this one property in not a great suburb of Pittsburgh. It was pretty bad, right? And we would go there and my dad was like, let's make this property great. Let's get some good renters in there. We redid the entire thing, and it was a really cool house. Big house. It had, I think, 3 different units in it. We redid the whole thing, and within 2 years, the place was destroyed with roaches. It was nasty. And finally, my dad's like, I just can't. I can't do it anymore. Always trying to get the rent. Always trying to push. Can you pay me back rent? It was a nightmare. So you have to be careful on where you're choosing. Getting the right renters is important. And also think about how quickly things turn over, right? I had a rental in Old Town that would turn over every year, and it was a pain.
I remember
it
that.
got to be a pain. I was like, I don't want to deal with this every year, So
well, it's easy to say, oh, you go buy a rental property. It's a little bit harder to say, hey, you haven't paid rent in the past 4 months. Can you pay rent? And there's roaches crawling on your shoes.
Yeah, and think about what happened to us 2 years ago when there was a rental moratorium, right? Like people didn't have to pay their rent if they didn't want to. They just wouldn't pay, and then the landlords out it. It's not like most of these landlords were mom and pop shops, right? And they're going to be destroyed because you're not going to pay your rent because the government says you don't have to.
Well, if you don't want to be a landlord but still want to build wealth through real estate, Shawn, I have just
Tell me another
topic
one.
for you.
Another one.
This is crowdfunding. So think like Fundrise, CrowdStreet. Basically, you pay money and you get dividends. It's kind of like a stock almost. Fundrise, you're basically just having a bigger investment arm. Pay for properties, manage properties, collect income, and then you'd get dividends on top of that.
That's a great idea. You don't have to deal with the upfront bull. You just let it to somebody else. You give them the money, reap the rewards.
Much lower risk.
Safer. Yeah.
Next one on a similar note is to buy a REIT, and again, not have to deal with a singular property. Shawn, for those people out there, what is a REIT or REIT? What's a REIT?
Real Estate Investment Trust. And it's kind of the same thing. You're investing in a trust.
But is it like a stock? Is it like a startup? Is it like a property management
company?
It's
more like a stock, isn't it? Yeah. It's more like a stock.
So I'm asking you the question. I know the answer to the question, but
I didn't up my game on REITs, but it's more of the stock option where there are these startups now that you can actually give money to invest in and say, I want you to buy, I want to be a part of this project and this project and this project, where a REIT would just be like, hey, here's our portfolio basically, and you're investing in it.
And oftentimes they'd show you what they're buying.
Yeah.
So next one is to put your money in a syndication fund. All of these are like fairly similar like kind of like under the same umbrella. Yeah. So syndication, think accredited investor, think like, I don't know, it's going to sound bad, but like Instagram influencer, like Grant Cardone, someone who has like $1 billion portfolio, and it's like, hey, if you have $10,000 or if you have $100,000, come invest in this 500 unit, Houston multifamily building that, we're going to be building, and then, we'll pay you out, or we're going to be buying, and then we'll pay you out, after X number of months.
Yeah, very similar, just a smaller segment, I would say. It's one person that is kind of heading this whole thing.
Number 5 is to buy a house, make it a home, and stay put. Long-term ownership of your house is the main way Americans build wealth through real estate.
100%.
With talks of downturn, talks of recession, I even heard someone talk about a depression. I think it was Robert Kiyosaki. I don't know if you follow him. He was also talking about how canned tuna is going to be more valuable than silver because of inflation. So take that with a grain of salt. But buying a house, in terms of a downturn, you only make money when you sell. So like all of my stock losses, all of my crypto losses, there's a lot of them. Unless I'm selling the coin, or unless I'm selling the stock, or unless you're selling the house in a downturn, you haven't lost money. And if you were going to sell after like a year anyways, that probably wasn't the best idea. So if you just stay in the house for long enough, that is an amazing way to build wealth.
Absolutely. It's the number one way. And I always tell people, listen, why are you, I mean, it's okay to rent. All right. There's renters and there's buyers, but when you buy real estate, it's the number one way to build wealth. And not every real estate investment is going to be awesome. The longer you hold, the better off you're going to be. And, our real estate goes like this all the time, up and down. And don't be petrified when it goes down. Just stay put. Just hang on. And it'll come back. And, you sell when your life says to sell. Don't try to time the market like we say in every other, facet of life. Just do it when life tells you to do it. The thing is, if you feel like you overpaid for a property, well, you know what? It'll drop. And with that, so will interest rates, right? So right now we're seeing a rise in interest rates. That rise is to stop inflation, right? So what's the next step in inflation? What happens is then the whole economy starts tanking, right? So that pulls the inverse around. And how do we stop an economy from tanking is to lower interest rates. So it's a cycle, right? So right now we're trying to stop inflation. Higher interest rates. All right, interest rates go up. Then your prices go down. Prices are down here. Nothing's happening. Economy's falling. Interest rates fall. Prices go back up. Refinance at the bottom. You know what I mean? So it's a cycle. Don't get scared about it. Just learn about it, learn from it, and stay put.
Very well said. Let's move on to our third article. This comes to us from Realtor.com. This is the complete home selling timeline. Here's how long it'll take to sell your house.
That's a good one because a lot of people don't realize how long it takes, right?
And a lot of times the most amount of time will be the preparation, right?
Yeah.
Getting it ready, because by the time you go on the market, it should sell quickly, and then you should close quickly, and then you should move out fairly quickly. But Shawn and I are having conversations a year, 2, maybe even 3 years out from when people are looking to sell. Now, the first 2 steps, they have 10 steps. I might flip-flop these 2 steps. They say number 1, make renovations, repairs, and then number 2, find a listing agent. I may find a listing agent first, just so I know what renovations and repairs. Because Shawn, we've both been on listing appointments where the seller will be like, okay, I'm interviewing 3 people. Like, do you think I should paint? Do you think I should renovate this bathroom? Like, and then they're gauging like each of the realtors' responses on what renovations to make.
Yeah, I just signed a listing agreement last week, and it was, we're going to do some work to the property. And I think that everybody should do work to your property, unless you've got an immaculate home that you've been updating for every year, right? But a lot of these people have lived in their homes for 20, 30 years, and they still have 20, 30-year-old paint, even though they say, hey, I've painted. Yeah, but you painted your own style, right? Or, oh, I've done these updates. Yeah, but you did them 20 years ago. So we are always going to want to do preparation for that listing. And in this home, we're repainting the entire place, the entire home. Repainting a house is, pretty affordable.
What's the price point of that house?
It's going to be just under $700,000. And we are spending, to paint it, we're spending $3,500. So 0.5%, right? 0.5% to paint, like you were saying before.
That was the number. I just added it up on my little calculator. I was like, all right, that's that. So what the number Shawn and I are talking about is you should spend at least 0.5% of the sales price to get your property ready to sell.
Yeah, and so this is, and it depends on where you are in the country as well. But this is a 3-level home. It's a good sized home, and we're painting the entire place. Then you want to look at the exterior things, clean it up, power wash. Power wash is so cheap. We're power washing the whole exterior of the home for $150, right? You get all that old black, the mold, mildew stuff, the lines from the water running down where the gutters are and stuff like that. Just get rid of it all and make it nice and clean. It's $150. Then you look at painting the exterior doors, make sure all the caulking looks good. These are simple little fixes that I think everybody should do. And this is the timeline. So hire your agent. We're going to get in there and I'm going to help you do that. Matt's going to help you do that. There's a lot of agents that don't ever want to dig into that. They're like, I just sell properties, man. I don't want to do all that stuff. We have the experience in doing that. So we like to see the process. I like to see the before and after.
I'll suggest what repairs to make. I'm not going to be power washing.
I'm not power washing.
Someone else.
Now I used to. I used to do anything. I was over there blowing leaves, whatever. If it comes down to pictures and it's got to be done, I'll do it. But yeah, we're not doing this ourselves, but we've been through it so many times that we have the contractors to do it. And so, but that timeline can take just to paint and get it prepared, you're talking 3 weeks, right? At least.
Minimum.
And then so think about a 3-week preparation time.
And it always takes a little bit longer, so maybe add in a
does.
week or two of buffer time, contractor time, as we call it.
Yeah, and then you want to think about staging too. So staging is tough.
Okay. You're getting ahead of yourself. Sean's getting excited over there. Look at that. Okay, so step number 3, estimate how much your house is worth. So this is, why you want to have your trusted agent working with you at this time. And, of course, everyone knows I should know how much your house is worth, but there's some art and some science that goes into it, because when we have interest rates that, double or quadruple, we can't really look at the neighbor's house next door that sold 6 months ago for $100,000 more and be like, this is the comp, when there are significantly fewer buyers and significantly, more houses to choose from. That all should be taken into consideration when coming up with the house's value.
100%. There's a lot of buyers right now that think their property is worth what their neighbor sold for 2 months ago, but it's not. We have seen a drastic change, and you have to think about the value of money and the value of interest rates. And so when that property sold, the interest rates were 4%, and it sold for $100,000 over. But 2 percentage points is what it's gone up since then, and that has reduced the price, right? Basically, the affordability of it, because so now you have to adjust for that in your price, because people aren't going to want to pay $500 more a month for the same house, right? And that's essentially what they're doing, because the interest rates have gone up. So you have to cushion for that. And it's knowing the current market and knowing how it's ebbing and flowing is very important. So if your real estate agent isn't really in the business and doesn't really pay attention to these things, you might want to find somebody that is, because, not only do we feel it every day, but we talk to other agents that are feeling it. And so we kind of get a flow of everything that's happening.
Full-time real estate agent is a must. We're going to start to see it whenever there's a market downturn. People leave the business. Whenever there's a market upswing, people enter the business.
Yep.
All right, Shawn, number 4, your favorite, declutter/stage your home. I mean, if you're going to be living in the property, my kind of rule of thumb is just remove 50% of the furniture. And it sounds like a lot, because it is a lot, because you have way too much stuff and you need to get rid of stuff. Going through your property should feel like you're walking through a magazine. That's what it should feel like, because if I say you have too much stuff, buyers are going to say you have too much stuff. And in terms of staging your home, you are bringing your home to a party, a listing party. You're going on the market. So get dressed for the party. Don't be naked for the party. Get dressed for the property. Get dressed for the party. Stage your house.
That's a great analogy. I love that. I'm going to use that.
Do it.
Hey, seller, you're going to a party.
Yeah.
I like it. Seriously, that's good. But this is one of the hardest conversations to have, is your furniture isn't cutting, it's not cutting it. My furniture doesn't cut it either, half the time. So I staged my property when I sold it, half of it. I took half of my stuff out, and that's reality, right? But it's a hard conversation to have, and say, listen, these beds are just outdated. Why don't we just let us stage the bedrooms, and we're going to do it minimalistic with a bed, 2 side tables, 2 lamps, and a couple pictures. That's it. Simple, good, picture-worthy places, right? So if you have these old bedposts, tall things, you have to get rid of them.
What'd you do with your stuff when you were on the market? You decluttered? Where'd it go?
So I got a pod. The pods that pull up right into your driveway.
Did they take it away?
They took it away.
I hope they took it away.
Yeah, of course. You don't leave the pod in your driveway either.
Have you seen listing photos with pods in the driveway?
Dude, don't leave. It's not that expensive. We had a huge pod, bigger than this room, and we filled it, and they took it away. It was like $200 a month, $150. It wasn't that much, and we got rid of everything, tons of stuff, and then our place looked so good after that. And we always say, there's a difference between living in your property and selling your property. Go to the party and dress nice.
When you got the pod back, did all that stuff go back into the new house, or were you like, we can actually live like this?
Guys, please just throw it away. Just throw it away. Don't even pack it up.
You were able to live without the stuff for a little bit.
Of course. And then it came back, and I'm like, what? It just went into my basement, the unfinished basement. And I'm like, I don't want this stuff anymore. Yeah. I should have just gotten rid of it. So think about that before you start packing up that pod and saying, oh, I want this furniture, this. It's probably junk. So just sell it, give it away, donate it, whatever you got to do. Because when it gets to your new house, you can be like, I should have just keep the essentials, keep the nice furniture.
Number 5 is create your listing, and Realtor.com gives a little average breakdown of each one of these segments. Create your listing is like putting your listing together, putting the pictures up, things like that. They give it 1 hour to 2 weeks. Shawn, I'm guessing they don't do videos if it only takes 1 hour. So in terms of getting your listing ready, think like videos, think 3D tours, think floor plans, things of that nature. For me, getting the direct mail marketing ready, I need about a week to get all that together so that everything can hit, the dominoes can fall. They say average time 1 hour to 2 weeks. Shawn, what are your thoughts on getting that together?
Yeah, I mean, technically, I can have the photos up on your listing in 24 hours. Photos are usually going to take us 24 hours to get. We use professionals. They have to, put them through their systems and make the lighting look good, and then they send them to us. But I always say at least a week. I want pictures. If I'm going live Thursday, I want them the Thursday prior so that I can create the marketing, get it all done in time for the open house that next Sunday. 3D tours usually take, when we do 3D tours every time, they're going to take probably 48 hours before they populate. But then videos are the number one thing that our team does. We love doing listing videos, and they are very time consuming. Not only very time consuming, they're mind consuming and they're money consuming, but they make such a difference in our opinion. Not a lot of people are doing them. And so that takes some time. First of all, coming up with an idea or the things to say or standing in front of the camera and making it look good. And then once you're done filming it, or coming up with the idea, then filming it, that takes a long time. Then the editor, who we have, a great editor, he can turn those around pretty quickly for us if we're like, come on, dude, we need this. But in all reality, it's going to take 3 days, 4 days to just turn it around. So you want to prepare. And I always, I tell people I need at least a week. So once your home is ready, it's going to be at least a week before we go, until we go on the market.
Number 6, hold home showings / open houses. We usually like to do open houses on Sundays and then also Saturdays. You can just do them as often as you can, essentially. And, showings, definitely leave the property. Don't be in the property when you're there. And if you are living there, I try to give sellers at least 2 hours notice. Some sellers need more. That's fine. But if you need like 12 or 24 hours notice, it's like, what are you doing? So I try to set the expectation to do 2 to 4 hours notice if a seller is living there. But speaking of expectations, Shawn, how are you setting expectations for your sellers in terms of, number of showings, how long it's going to take, number of offers, what to expect at the open house?
Yeah, I mean, it changes so quickly, right? I mean, a few weeks ago, we were saying, all right, we're going to have a food truck. We're going to have 50, 60 people through this open house. We'll probably get 20, 25 agent showings in a weekend. Now it's all changed. And so we're pushing as much as possible to get these people through the open houses. That's why it's so important to give us that week to prep, right? To get all this stuff out there so that we can drive traffic to these listings. But now, you're looking at maybe 5, 6, 7 agent showings over a week. You're looking at between 5 to 15 people through an open house or groups through an open house. Time frames have extended too. So we used to be gone in a weekend or a week. Now it's maybe 3 weeks, a month. But that's a normal market. That's normal. I mean, a month is what it should take you for your house to sell. It shouldn't take a weekend with multiple contracts and going crazy. So, set those expectations up front. Have a party. Your open houses are parties. You want to be hosting them, having your agent stand in them, knowing what to talk about, how to talk about the area, how to talk about the house. These are very important. I've been to so many open houses where I've learned what not to do. And I hope when people come to my open house, they learn what to do. And I feel like talking to people and getting them excited and keeping them in the home is your job. Your job isn't to just stand there and just say, hey, how you doing? Come on in. That's not an open house, in my opinion. You're a body at that point. You have to have knowledge. You have to be able to speak.
You ever go to an open house and the agent's like sitting at the dining room table?
Absolutely. It drives me crazy. Doesn't even stand up.
Can you stand up?
Like, man, do you feel comfortable doing that? Like, I would be crawling out of my skin if that was me. I'd be like,
Number 7, wait for an offer or offers to roll in and negotiate the best deal. This is when it could come to like a month or so. And Shawn, at what point are you adjusting the price if you're not getting an offer?
Within 3 weeks.
Why is that?
Because I think in this market, again, it depends on the market. And it depends on where you price it to begin with, right? If you're pricing it, an example, I have one listed right now. We didn't even price it at the top of the market. We priced it to about $15,000 below what one had sold for, but it had a couple tweaks to the property. But we realized quickly that, that market is gone. And so 21 days in the market, we dropped. So we just dropped $25,000.
25. And how did that work out, or is that house still in the
We
market?
just did it yesterday.
Just did it yesterday.
So
any spike in showings, or kind of waiting for it to?
Yeah, we're kind of waiting. I mean, this is going to take some time. So what happens is you're going to drop that price, and it's going to be the middle of the week. And a lot of people right now aren't seeing places in the middle of the week. Before, when it was crazy, they were. Now people are tending to wait till the weekend. So we're hoping that the weekend traffic is good, and we're going to host another open house.
There we go. Number 8, accept an offer and wait for the home inspection and appraisal. So usually the home inspection will be done immediately after the offer is accepted. So think like anywhere from 1 to like 5 days after the deal has been signed. However, the appraisal, it can sometimes take a little bit longer if someone's going out there in person. It may take a week. It may take 2 weeks. It may take 2.5, maybe 3 weeks if it's like a VA appraiser and they've like forgot about your property. So that's my usual timeline.
Yeah. Now think date of ratification. Date of ratification means the date of final acceptance between the buyer and seller. Whatever that date is when your contingencies start as a buyer. So if you put a 5-day home inspection contingency in there, that means you have 5 days from that date that you ratified to get a home inspector in there, get the report over to the seller, and with an addendum. Then your appraisal contingency might be 21 days. That's kind of a standard marker in our contracts. We could put whatever time we want in there, but that again starts at that ratification date. It's not consecutive after the home inspection, then the appraisal contingency starts. They both start at the same time and 21 days. So most of the time, if you have a good local lender, you should have your results for your appraisal within 14 days in a normal market. But like you said, VA sometimes gets slower. So
Number 9 is to close the deal, pop the bubbly, pop the champagne. Mm-hmm. This will take, they say 10 to 45 days. I'd probably put it at like 20 to 60 days.
Yeah.
10 days is a pretty aggressive closing. It has happened. I've done it before. Shawn has done it before, but more likely than not, you're going to see 20 to 40, 50, 60 days.
Absolutely.
And then finally, moving out, you could move out. Okay, you have to move out before settlement. I'm going to say that because it may not be obvious. You have to move out before settlement. Or if there is a rent back, you go to settlement and then you move out before your rent back period expires.
Yes, and what you need to know about a rent back is 2 things. If it's a cash buyer, you can rent back for as long as you want. If that buyer has a loan, there's a 60-day cap. So you can only rent back for 2 months.
Yeah, because buyers will say, hey, if I give them a longer rent back, is that advantageous?
Yeah, is that advantageous?
It is. You're going to go to jail for mortgage fraud.
Yeah.
But it's advantageous.
Basically, the lender says, well, you're no longer buying that for your personal residence. You're buying that to rent it. That's what they see. So that's why they cap it at 60 days. So just remember that when you're buying something, cap that rent back for 60 days.
There you have it. That was a brief overview that went a little in depth on the old selling strategy, things to do, things not to do.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that recap, Shawn?
Yeah, I think it was good. It was something we haven't done in a while. And, we take it for granted, but there's a lot of people that don't understand timelines and how long these things take to prep. How long will it take to sell my house? How long are these timelines? And think about it. People don't sell their house for 20 years, right? They don't know how long this is going to take. So every day people are entering the market that need to sell a house that have never sold a house before. Yeah. So I think it's important that we cover these steps. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, if you thought it was important to cover these steps, would love to know your comments. Leave them down in the comment section below. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, we'll see you then.
Take care.